Can you all hear me? Okay, great. So, hello everyone. Welcome to Argo community meeting. We took a break of 2-3 months in between. So happy to see you all back. We wanted to make a couple of release of Argo CD and Argo workflow before we started gathering back again. And we were there on Slack. So welcome everyone. We'll spend 1 minute to do a quick roll call of like which company you're working for, if you want to say. And then we will start with Argo CD. For the first 30 minutes, we'll talk about what's new and what's coming next and get your feedback. And then the next 30 minutes will be Argo workflows and Argo events, and we will talk about what's new and what's coming next and get your feedback. So with that, in this room from Intuit, we have Jesse, Bala, Alex M, and Alex C, and also Danny from Intuit, and we also have Ed. And others want to speak out, like where you're using Argo CD? Anybody? Any volunteers?
Yeah. Hey guys.
Yeah. So go first.
Yeah. So my name's Isaac. I'm an SRE at Tesla. So good to kind of meet you all. I've kind of been active more on Slack, but it's good to see you guys in person, or pseudo person.
Okay.
Okay. So hello. I'm Tim from SAP. I think more precisely the Gardener team. So we're doing the managed Kubernetes across multiple clouds, and we're using Argo to test our clusters. So like testing our cloud providers with specific Kubernetes versions and stuff like that. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Wei. So I'm from Ant Financial, working on the AI infrastructure team. And so I talked with the guy sometimes before. So we are in the middle step of migrate some workflow to Argo side for both AI workflow and some data flow. And also we are working on the Kubernetes side. So we are promoting the Argo as a default workflow engine at the financial here. And also I'm very interested on the Argo CD. So start some time to take a look about this project. And we also think about how to build the CI/CD on Kubernetes side. So Argo CD will definitely one of the options we are looking into right now.
Okay. Anybody else wants to introduce and talk about how you're using Argo?
Hi, this is Clemens. I'm an experimental physicist at CERN, the particle physics lab, and I'm not using Argo CD at the moment, but I'm using Argo, and I'm using it basically for my physics analysis workflows and basically make them reproducible and reusable and reinterpretable and things like
that. Okay. Okay, given that we have 1 hour and 3 projects to cover, why don't we start off with Argo CD? Today, Alex is going to talk about the last release and the new features.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, we've got 0.12 release, and I assume you know a little bit about Argo CD already, so I won't cover everything. I'm just going to go through, what was released in recent release. So let me start from UI changes, and okay. So here's how new UI looks like. We've got a bunch of improvements, mostly on application-related pages, and the first one you can see is now we have filters. That was, we suffered from missing filters a lot ourselves, and now you can filter by project, by status, by health status, and that is really helpful if you have hundreds of apps like on the screen. So when you can quickly find all the apps which are out of sync and which are in sync, you can filter based on the project. And in addition to that screen, we also have kind of like a summary screen, which just shows you breakdown by status and a couple of charts. So, and this is useful if you, you can project it to a bigger screen and you can quickly get a state of all of your apps in one screen. Okay, and in addition to filtering, we also have search now. So if you know exactly what you're searching for, you can just type the name, Argo CD, and just click enter, and immediately you will be redirected to the particular screen, to that application. So filtering is here, and we also got a lot of feedback about the tile view. So tile view looks very nice, but if you have hundreds of apps, basically you cannot, the tile is pretty big and you cannot fit a lot of such applications into one screen. So we implemented the table view. And table view is just a regular table, but advantage that now you can fit much more applications on the screen. Okay, so next, let's switch to application details page. Here we have, again, several enhancements driven by community feedback. First one is we have better manifest view and div view. Before it used to be JSON-based div, which was kind of, basically we had to take YAML, convert it into JSON, and then compare field by field. It was very accurate, but not what users want to see, because in the end you want to see your YAML. So now you see the YAML representation, which has syntax highlighting, and we have inline div as well as side-by-side div. So in this particular example, you can easily see that there is deployment and its image is different from your expected state. And as an additional bonus, now you can just edit manifests right in that UI. So I'm going to demo it really quickly. So I can just go and change my image from 0.9 to 0.2 and save it. And basically, as you can see, my application is now in sync and its state is progressing. And one additional enhancement, so we've got several bug requests, bug reports, which was caused by confusion. It was unclear if what you think is filtered or not. Now we have clear indicator. This is that kind of virtual node represents filtered elements, and if you want to remove your filter, just click on it, and we kind of reset the view back into unfiltered state. That's all I wanted to cover about UI changes. Any questions so far? Any feedback? Okay, either way, you can give your feedback later. So now I want to switch to the next feature. We've implemented a bunch of features which basically improved usability of Argo CD, and we discovered it thanks to the community. So first was, now we have support for, we implemented a feature named custom health checks, and idea that we all know that Kubernetes has a bunch of CRDs, and each CRD has unique status, which carries the health information, and it was impossible to just bundle all possible health checks into the Argo CD. So instead, we decided to just go and implement some kind of extension mechanism. So now it's possible to implement Lua script, implement custom logic which assess health of a CRD, and include it into Argo dynamically. So what I'm showing you right now is application which has a cert manager certificate, and Argo CD is configured to assess health of certificate, and basically it analyzes the status of certificate, extract conditions, and then surface it to the screen. So it's showing that certificate is healthy and it was renewed successfully, and that message was taken from the status. And there are two ways you can get custom health checks yourself in your own Argo CD. One is you can just basically inline your health check into Argo CD config map. And I'm showing it right now on my screen. So we've got new field called resource customization. And in that field, you can just define your resource group kind and the health check. And idea that health check is supposed to handle all versions of your CRD, and it should just check the status and return status and corresponding message for the status. And if your resource is, used by multiple people, like certificate, you can just contribute it back to Argo and bundle it. So if you want to do it, the documentation itself has description how to do it, and I'm going to just tell about it really quickly. So we have resource customization directory, where you can define your subdirectory for your resource kind, and you can just drop the Lua script file and some examples and unit tests. And then send us pull request, and basically, if you do that, then health check for your CRD will be available for everyone. Okay. If there is no more questions, I want to move to the next feature. Again, it was so what we learned is that not every Helm chart and not every CRD is perfect. The common problem was that sometimes it was very common for Helm charts, in particular, they just have fields which not really exist in CRD, and or let's say field by default is, let's say, null, but the controller of the CRD just reject nulls and replace it with empty string, for example. So there were CRDs which never, it was impossible to get them into synced state. And instead, we cannot chase each and every CRD and fix the bugs in it. So instead, we just let users to do kind of configure, customize diffing logic. So now it is impossible to just exclude certain fields from the diffing, and you can configure it either per application, if you know that this particular application has a problematic CRD, or you just can configure it on system level. And this is sample configuration, and the mutating webhook CRD, we just know it has basically the problematic field, which is CA bundle. It is different every time you sync. So, and you can just configure Argo CD to just ignore that field. And you can do it by specifying a group kind of your resource and JSON path, which points to the field which you want to exclude from the diffing. So this way, basically, you will, you can handle some edge cases in your particular setup. Okay, so let me switch next to the next feature. I'm really excited about that feature, which is custom template plugins. So we've got several requests to include. So let me step back. Argo CD supports has built-in support for most popular template templating tools like Helm, Customize, Quesonet, but there are many more. And instead of adding support, first-class support in Argo CD, we decided to just provide a way to extend to dynamically edit. So let me demonstrate it first. So this application, it's called Customized Helm, and the name is Customized Helm is because it's comprised of Helm and customized customization on top of it. So this is obviously not supported out of the box because not everyone needs it. But if you want to have this functionality, you can follow steps in the README file. And now in Argo CD config map, we have config management plugins field, which is YAML array. And what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to give a name of which you choose yourself to your config management plugin, and just CLI commands to generate manifest. So in this example, first we execute Helm template and just dump generated YAML into the all.yaml file, and then customize build, and customize build expect content, YAML to be generated in YAML all.yaml, and it applies some overlays on top of it. And as you can see, I already did it on my Argo CD instance. As you can see, we have deployment, and that deployment has customization, which I configured in the Quesonet. This is one way to use it, and second, I think the even more common way to use custom template plugins is to add. Let's say if you have bash scripts which generate YAML files, and you are not ready to migrate right away to customize or to the tool of your choice, you can just invoke your bash scripts to generate YAML and and start using Argo CD. Okay. Any questions so far? Feel free to stop me, please.
Yeah, question about that. So does that mean that we can bring our own templating engines as well, like Jinja or Go templates?
Yes, exactly. This is the main goal of it. All you have to do just configure the bash commands which you want to execute, and we also have instructions to how to bring your own binaries into. Basically, there is a component repository server responsible to generate YAMLs, and we basically suggest to use init container or customize the repo server image and just place more binaries into the image.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. All right. So next, we keep working on improving reliability and availability of a tool. So now we have we exposed much more Prometheus metrics, and community contributed awesome Grafana sample dashboards, which I'm going to show right now. So you can see all your applications, you can see health of your applications, you can see sync stats. Basically, you can see how frequently users syncing. If syncs are failing, you can see when failures happened, and you can Grafana supports also. Basically, you can search for that particular failure, and you can discover the application name which failed to sync. And yeah, it's a huge thank you for providing the sample dashboard. And second enhancement is high availability. So basically, before 0.12, Argo CD had one single point of failure, which was a application controller. Application controller used to serve few API queries which were used in the UI, and basically, if you try to upgrade Argo, you would get small downtime. So now we kind of get rid of that single point of failure, and we are using Redis. And now we start bundling two. We're giving two ways to install Argo. One is non-HA and one is HA. And HA is basically just includes HA Redis. So if you use HA, you will get by default one master Redis and two read-only replicas, and this lets you avoid downtimes during Argo CD upgrade. Yeah, that was a very common question on our Slack channel. What is the difference? And this is answer. So if you just playing with Argo, you don't need HA. If you have active users, then HA is going to help you because you won't get complaints about downtimes. Okay, that's all I had for what's new.
Do you want to talk anything about the performance improvement?
Performance improvements, I mean, you should not notice anything. Basically, we already improved performance in 0.11.
Yeah, but we didn't have a meeting after that. So.
Oh, okay. All right.
You can cover next steps.
Yeah, and
all right. Yeah, I have things to talk about. No. Okay, so we did performance improvements. In 0.11, we improved a lot, and there was a blog about it, and 0.12 has bug fixes, and we will have more bug fixes and improvements going forward. Yes, but I do want to talk now about what is coming next. So I think one big kind of announcement or not announcement, we're kind of getting closer to feature parity. Like all the must-have features, I think, done. We're going to call next release 0.1, so 1.0.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is and.
And we want to do it before KubeCon?
We want to do it before KubeCon. Only one kind of big user-facing feature is a network view. Idea that we want to provide. So right now the tree view is great, but it's not very useful if you want to troubleshoot your application. I mean, if you want to see what is happening with it, because usually end users are focused on services, ingresses, and pods, something which serve your traffic. And we're building one view which shows you that, and basically it does not use. It's a hierarchy based on how your traffic is flowing through the through the system. And this is, I think, like a corner feature of next release, and everything else is bug fixes and usability improvements. And once it is done, we will switch to 1.0, and we have, I mean, we start creating like understanding of what is going next. And I think this is that meeting is for. We want to get your feedback and see, what you want first, and we can share. I had like few ideas I wanted to share. So we keep getting requests to add, more features into Argo CD to improve its usability, but we kind of hesitate to implement them because they're kind of opinionated. And one way to handle it is to, so because Argo is Kubernetes native, we can use CRDs to, we can create more CRDs. Basically, we have very powerful plugin mechanism available, out of the box in Kubernetes. And right now, we have two open issues. One is Github integration, and there is some conversation in it. And I just created one, and I consolidated some different ideas from our Slack channel. I won't spend much time on it, but here's just to give you some idea what is it about. So we keep hearing that people want to create tokens declaratively. Right now, it requires press a button, but people like GitOps and they want to just create CID and get the token. And one way to do it, we can just go and implement that functionality in Argo CD, and everyone would have to wait for release. We would have to go through kind of stricter, PR review process, and we have limited time to do that. So instead of doing that in Argo CD, we can just create a separate project, and community can drive it. And one way to implement it could be to just create a token CID, which talks to Argo CD and executes necessary API, get the token, save it in status. Similar request is people want to manage the whole cluster using Argo CD, but Argo CD is basically kind of forcing to use applications, which each application manages part of the cluster. So, and one enhancement which was requested to auto-discover applications in the repository, we could implement it in Argo CD. Instead, we can just have CRD, which auto-create applications. And there are more ideas. So, and this is kind of important because if you need any of that functionality, and then you can, and if you have time, you can just drive it and implement as opinionated solution as you need. And then we can just, everyone can start using it. And one question we had for you is, we also need some way to kind of promote it in the community, and we have options. One option was, basically we just got two options so far. Just maintain list in the README file and collect links to existing projects. And second option is to create Argo or Argo Labs GitHub org and start accepting projects. And yeah, what do you think? What would be more, like, what is the better way for you?
Any feedback? Because we're trying to grow the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I mean,
any feedback in general about the roadmap, what we should prioritize in the next few releases? Or you all are still getting familiar with Argo CD and are more comfortable with Argo workflows? I think that's what I said.
Okay, that was the response. And okay, either way, let me just mention that because it will be recorded. One more, area where community can help is Helm charts. Basically, it's already all the Helm charts which we have for Argo are created by community, but we kind of, in your way, we're just standing and, we have to approve pull requests which we don't really understand because we're not like Helm experts. So instead, we're just going to, move our Helm charts into stable Helm chart repo. And if you're interested, just let us know and we can, collaborate and make you owner of the chart. And then this way you don't have to wait for, pull request approval and just make your changes which you need.
Okay.
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 Yeah, that's all I had.
Okay. So we have 3 more minutes before we start the Argo workflows part. I see Vaibhav has also joined, and Vaibhav, you can hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so we have Vaibhav from BlackRock and Jesse from Intuit, who is going to cover the next 30 minutes, and we will go over Argo workflows and Argo events. Jesse just did a release an hour ago to prepare for the meeting. So let's just wait for 2 more minutes because I don't know whether anybody else will join. We said we will start at 10:30. In the meantime, I see some more people have joined. Anybody else wants to talk about how they're using Argo workflows or Argo CD in their organization? Or people just want to listen?
I had a comment, or actually a question, not in response to your question, but related to some bug fixes in version 0.12. Could you talk a bit more about how Argo CD's interaction with Git has changed and the bug fixes around like the polling frequency, and if there are any upcoming changes to how Argo will interact with Git?
Yes, so one thing we're going to make one change. I think we should document. There is a way already to reduce amount of pulls to Git. It's just not documented. Argo application controller has just a CLI flag. But to completely solve the problem, basically Argo does not just periodically pull Git. Instead, it periodically reconciles application. And every time it reconciles, it has to go and get the latest state of application in Git. So what we do right now, we cache generated manifest, but if your application is pointing to a branch, then we need to know what is the latest commit on that branch, and we have to execute git remote ls, which is very lightweight code, but we do it. If you have lots of applications, we have to execute a lot of them, and we are considering to start caching latest commit on a branch. Yep.
Yeah, just to add to that, what was improved in 0.12 was that in 0.11, whenever there was application activity, like your pod, restarted, or it just changed from pending to running, like all of those resource activities would trigger what we call reconciliation of the application. A reconciliation of the application means, hey, did anything in Git change? Did anything in live change? Let me compare the sync status, the health status, and update the CRD object status. So the problem was that we were just asking Git on every, for example, pod update, hey, did head change? Like, is head still hash ABC123? So what was improved in 0.12 was that now when changes are made due to normal like resource activity, we don't involve Git at all. So that's what we call a partial reconciliation, and we only then call Git when someone refreshes the app, or which happens by default every 3 minutes, and that can be configurable through a command line parameter.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I know that was really helpful. That was something that myself and a colleague were looking into, and was actually a blocker for a wider adoption of Argo CD, was just that it was just hammering stash or get so frequently. So it's good to hear that those changes have made it in, and it sounds like there's some even more optimizations that are coming.
Yeah, the LS remote call, there's probably no reason why we have to do that every time. Even though it's a lightweight call, we do it once every 3 minutes for every application, which can add up.
And yeah, we understand. Basically, we got hit by ourselves. We tried to install Kubeflow, I think, and Kubeflow had some CRD which was changing like every second.
Yes.
And as a result, we got email from our GitHub Enterprise admin complaining that we are sending too many requests. So, and basically 0.12 improvement kind of solved our problem, but we're open to
Yeah, we run now like 1,600 applications across Intuit. So when when we hit these scaling things, we're usually the first ones to reach to hear about this. So.
Okay, just to do a time check, let's move on to Argo workflows.
Sure. Okay, I can take over. Let me do that. All right, can you guys see this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so after a long hiatus, we finally have a 2.3 workflow release candidate. So it's been a while. We've been mainly focused on Argo CD up until now, but now that we feel like CD is in a good spot, we're gonna divide our attention to both workflows and CD. So I'll go ahead and cover what's new in 2.3. I won't cover everything. For that, you can look at the release notes, but I'll dive into a couple of the bigger items. So the first one that I wanted to talk about was the support for additional what we call container runtime executors. And container runtime executors are basically traditionally Argo workflow was powered by access to the Docker daemon of the host node. Now this was, and there's a lot of security issues with this, because if you have a pod that is mapping var run docker.sock to a pod, essentially that pod has access to every container on that node, and this was basically like a non-starter for a lot of people. And so after that, we then implemented a kubelet-based executor and a Kubernetes-based executor. Those are both actually contributed from a community. Those worked, but it did not have support for artifact collection. And so now with the 2.3 release, we have a new executor called process namespace sharing. And the way this works is that the container, the wait sidecar that runs with the main container, it will when the controller schedules a pod, it will enable a mode in Kubernetes starting with 1.12. It's a feature that's beta in 1.12 called process namespace sharing. And what this means is the main container and the wait sidecar share the same process namespace. In other words, they are no longer PID1 in the pod. That's now the pod's container in Kubernetes, and then your main container and your wait sidecar are like PID 13 or 18 or something greater. What this allows us to do is actually the wait sidecar, if given sufficient privileges, it can actually access the root file system of the main container and then copy out artifacts that way. So it's kind of like a bit of a compromise between security and kind of having the same level of feature sets that the Docker executor had. So it's brand new. I did some pretty extensive testing to I think nearly all the functional tests are passing, except for one test that is only failing on GKE for some reason that I haven't figured out. But I encourage you guys to give it a try. This should be a good way to have a secure version of workflows. The one caveat that I will point out about process namespace sharing is that if your container exits very quickly, and I'm talking about less than like sub-second containers, it's the process namespace sharing, the way it's implemented, it may miss its opportunity to actually establish a file handle on the root file system of the main container, and it might fail to capture artifacts. So that's one trade-off that you might have with process namespace sharing. The other big, I guess, features, workflows now have priorities and parallelism limits. What this means is, and I'll show you how you can configure this. So this is a workflow controller config map. Basically, we now have this new field called parallelism, and this number represents the max total parallel workflows that you want to run on your system at the same time. This is per controller, so if you're running multiple workflow controllers, then it applies per controller. And basically, what this will allow you to do is, like, the problem was if you were to just flood your Kubernetes cluster with workflows, the controller would try to schedule pods as fast as it could. And then what you might end up with is just like tons of workflows that just kind of slow to a crawl. I mean, eventually they'll complete, but then, you know, if you're submitting 100 workflows, like all 100 will, you know, take like 6 hours to complete, but they all complete at that 6 hour. With parallelism, I mean, things will still take 6 hours, but at least the ones you submitted like earlier will finish before the ones you submitted after. And so this kind of goes in concert with the priority feature. So now that we have parallelism, when you submit workflows, you can actually specify a priority from the command line, or this can be a priority in your spec. And so a larger value represents a higher priority. This, I do need to mention, this has nothing to do with pod priority, which is actually a separate field in the pod spec. This is specific to workflows. But it's an integer value that you submit with your workflow, and you can also specify it in the spec, not just the command line. All right. So if you want, for the process namespace sharing, if you wanted to configure your controller with process namespace sharing instead of the Docker, you just add this one field called container runtime executor and give it the value of PNS. The other things you can configure now in the config map is your executor has a little more control of like what you want it to be, how the wait sidecar should be configured when it's scheduled. So maybe you want to add like some resource requests. This actually existed before, but now I think we're making it more general as a container object instead of just our custom field names. All right, let's see. But for the most part, actually, this release was mostly contributions from the community. I tried to give credit wherever I saw from external contributors, but if you look at this list, like the majority of these features were actually external contributions. So that's great. Yeah. Any questions on? Oh, I did one other thing. I thought was pretty neat. We have so this feature of larger workflow support. So what we're doing with large workflows, so people who had very large workflows, a lot of steps or large outputs, they were essentially hitting the 1 megabyte limit of etcd. And so there was a limit to how big a workflow could get, like in terms of like how many pods or how big the outputs could be. And so what was implemented was there's this automatic compression that happens when we detect a workflow has reached this limit. And because the workflow status is essentially just text, it compresses really nicely. And we expect there to be probably about anywhere from a 60 to 80% increase in workflow size by doing this automatic compression. And you don't need to do, Paula's telling me it's
2x.
Oh, okay, not 60?
No.
Okay. So you can get,
2x.
okay, Paula's telling me that you can get about twice the size of a workflow.
Yes.
I do think it's dependent on how well your thing compresses.
Yeah, then output, based on that output.
Yeah, like, right. And so this, where was I? Yeah, oh yeah, there's nothing you need to configure for this feature to work. It just happens whenever we get the API failure back from Kubernetes saying, hey, this object size is too big. At that point, we kick in the compression, and then it compresses the node status from then on. It is something to be aware of with 2.3, because if you were used to accessing the status.nodes field in the workflow, that field might be gone, and you might need to decompress a status.compressNodes field. We only compress when needed, so and we only do it when the workflow size reaches its limit. So, but it is something to be aware of. Okay, so that is the kind of the highlights of the 2.3 release.
May I ask a short question?
Sure.
Just a short question that came to my mind on that compression thing. Is it like specified with what it is compressed? I mean, I read in the pull request like that the Argo CLI and so on, and the UI will be aware of that compression. But I'm thinking about, let's say, programmatic access to Argo workflow where one reads out the status field programmatically.
Yeah, that's right. That's why I did mention that it's something that you kind of need to be aware of 2.3. So the CLI and the UI both understand this compression behavior. So they do two things. They check if that field is empty string or not, and if it's not an empty string, they know that it's a base 64 encoded gzip of the node status, and they decompress it on the fly. From the CLI perspective, if you are saying something like Argos get workflow Jesse's workflow -o YAML, that will always return it uncompressed. But if you're using something like kubectl, which has is just doing a proxy of, just returning the raw on storage format, that will have that base 64 encoded gzip. The UIs will always return it uncompressed.
I see. So when I access it programmatically, I can basically base 64 decode and unzip myself.
Yeah.
And you will get JSON string. So base 64, then unzip, and then you will get JSON string which you have to unmarshal into JSON.
Yeah, there is if you're using Go, there is a helper for this. It's I put it in. I moved it, by the way. So there's this helper that you can call decompress workflow, and you can see what it's doing. It's just it's just if it's empty string, if it's not an empty string, then we go through this thing and then set node status. And the only thing we compress is the node status. The other stuff like pending, like the phase, the started at timestamp, finished at timestamp, those type of metadata are not compressed. Only the node status. And that's generally some stuff that people aren't accessing, usually aren't accessing that directly, but some people are.
Cool, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so what we plan for 2.4. So in the spirit of trying to have more frequent releases with smaller payloads. So this is what we're thinking for 2.4. For 2.4 internal, we have a persistence need. We're starting to use workflows, for data processing and stuff. And we want workflows to be persistent like forever or for a really long time. For 2.4, persistence will be probably the anchor feature of Argo. And the idea is that there will be some abstraction layer it needs to be flexible enough that people can bring their own persistence, like if they have a custom table that they want workflows to be inserted into. Basically, we would be able to, anytime the controller is saving a workflow, it could additionally save it into your persistence layer too. So if that's Postgres, then you can then use Postgres to power like a UI or some other system to get the status of workflows. And then at that point, you wouldn't be talking to Kubernetes to get the workflow status. You would be talking to your database to get workflow status. So that's what we're thinking. We're still in the design mode for that, but that's what we're planning as the anchor feature. This should enable basically large or infinitely sized workflows, because if we're no longer storing workflow status in the CRD, and we're storing in a database, then our workflows can grow to basically be any size. And then we also have a huge backlog of stuff that has just accumulated over the last few months, and we want to get to those. And so for 2.4, we want to limit it to kind of these small features. Of course, community contributions are always welcome too. All right, I did want to stop and give the Argo events a chance.
Okay. Vaibhav, you want to go next?
Yeah. Thanks, Jesse. Can you guys see my screen?
I need to stop my sharing. Okay.
Can you start sharing
I think
again?
you need to start sharing.
Yeah. Just quickly do that. All right.
Yeah.
So for Argo events, we are currently in the process of releasing version 0.10. So basically, the focus of this release would be to add functionality for triggers. In the previous releases, we kind of focused on integrating different like outside entities like cloud providers, something like Slack, GitHub, all these things into gateways. So to kind of like get more, to kind of like grow ecosystem of the gateways. But now this release will be focusing more towards how to add the policies for trigger execution, back-off, retry strategies, and stuff like that. So one of the important feature of this release would be to support kind of like a back-off feature, and the execution policy. So basically this would kind of like derive how the trigger cycles. So consider you have multiple triggers for a particular set of events, and how would you want to like define the policy of execution? What should happen if the first trigger round fails? What should happen if the trigger 1 fails? Whether trigger 2 should go on and like should it get executed and stuff like that. So we added that feature. The next one is, because Customize is now gaining traction, we want to like have the support for directly adding the trigger resource as a part of the sensor spec. So previously used to have like inline triggers, but now we have something like this where you don't have to define an inline trigger, which basically used to be a string, but now you define the actual spec, so it now becomes easy to use it with Customize. And the next issues are.
May I ask how you were actually able to do that?
Sorry. Let me just quickly go back to that. You are saying this one?
Yeah. So instead of an inline string, if you have unstructured
kind of
data.
Yeah. Yeah, this is unstructured. You know how the unstructured structure is basically. So we are what we are doing is we are literally putting unstructured struct over here, and we are converting that into back to whatever because we are using a dynamic client, right? Dynamic informer and client. It's unstructured anyways, so it's easy for us to just like take this particular piece of unstructured map and just pass it to the client, because all the schemes for clients are already registered, so we don't care what exactly is the custom resource or standard resource or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think we might want to borrow this technique first. Nice.
Yeah. So with like the previous releases, we had a lot of changes with the gateway spec and the sensor spec, and it was causing quite a confusion with users like, oh, why is this not working? Because the answer was usually like, oh, this spec is changed, this field is not available anymore, we added this feature and we restructured the spec and stuff like that. So we thought of like tackling that issue, and we are going to in this release, and this is the consistent version examples, where once you create a particular gateway sensor or event source, you mark it with a particular version, and the controllers and the gateways and the sensors, they only accept a particular version. So even if we change spec however we like, you are sticking with a one particular version spec, and that should work with the corresponding controllers. So not only we just looking for instance ID and stuff like that, we are also looking for a particular version of that resource. We thought of like adding the CRDs for each gateway to make it better in terms of versioning, but that what we thought it was basically an overkill to have a CRD for separate gateway, but we just like decided to just add a simple label with a version and let the controller check, let the gateways check whether they are whether that particular label is set and the version against that label is what they are expecting. And then there are a couple of enhancements to existing gateways. For the next release, we are again going to focus on adding more gateways in terms of like integrating with Microsoft's Azure Blob and stuff like that. But for this particular release, these are the features that we want to introduce. That's it.
Cool.
Any feedback? So is there any feature any of you want to see in upcoming releases while you're using Argo workflows or events? Pretty quiet. Maybe I should call out names. Does this time work for you all? Okay.
Yeah.
I think people are more comfortable asking questions on Slack. So, so thanks everyone for joining. We will try to do this once a month, and let us know over Slack whether you want to split it into 2 meetings or this format works, and we'll take it from there. Any other questions? The team is always there on Slack. All right. Thanks everyone. Have a nice day.
Thanks.
Bye.